of America doing some damage control this morning against a growing sex abuse scandal. It stems from a scathing report in the LA Times that found the Boy Scouts failed to report hundreds of cases of alleged abuse over a 20-year period. Now, in response, the Boy Scouts will review more than 50 years of so-called perversion files on alleged sexual predators. The Scouts also released a study saying kids are safer with them than at home. This despite admitting hundreds of young boys have been abused over the years. This report, this independent review, says in part, these files show that children in scouting were safer and less likely to experience inappropriate sexual behavior in scouting than in their own families, schools, and during other community activities supervised by adults. Now, this report was compiled by University of Virginia psychiatrist Dr. Janet Warren, who testified as an expert witness for the Scouts in 2010 in a civil lawsuit filed by a victim of abuse. With me now is Tom Scales, a survivor of sexual abuse while he was in the Scouts. He's now the executive director of the abuse advocacy group Voice Today. And Jason Felch is the LA Times reporter who helped break the story on sex abuse in the Scouts. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I want to start yours with you, Tom. You're a survivor of sexual abuse while you were in the Scouts, you say. What's your reaction to this study from a psychiatrist who says that young men, boys in the Scouts are just as safe in the Scouts as they are in broader society?
I think they missed the whole point. The whole point really is, how do we protect children, and what happens to all these children? To recognize that many young men, I've never reported mine, and many young men don't report. And the stigma of the abuse, the cultural barriers to a young man speaking out, so they have no basis. In fact, they can talk only about reported numbers. The reported numbers, like most of the statistics around child sexual abuse, are generally accepted as being very small representation of reality.
I think many people this morning are also saying, you know, the point of the Boy Scouts, a values-driven organization that teaches leadership, is that parents think their children, if anything, are safer in this kind of environment than they are in. I think that a lot of people this morning, Tom, are saying that that's not really much of an excuse for sexual abuse going on in any kind of organization.
I mean, they're teaching our young men to be trustworthy, brave, loyal. The mentors who are teaching them, and frankly, the people who are in charge today, where they have had to literally litigate to get access to the files to understand the extent of the damage to children, clearly they've lost their focus as a group, and they certainly don't model the behaviors that they represent.
Jason, I want to talk to you about the summary section from this report, this psychiatrist report about the alleged abuse going on within the Scouts. While it was not perfect and mistakes clearly occurred, BSA's file system has functioned well in keeping many unfit adults out of scouting. These claims of abuse were not swept under the carpet and ignored. Rather, suspected offenders were pursued and oftentimes banned from scouting over the fervent objection and at times even the opinion of the local community. The study makes no mention of reporting abuse to police. Remind us what your reporting for the LA Times found about cases that were not reported, and what do you think about the numbers here that this report from the Scouts is coming up with, that the rate of abuse is the same as it is in the broader society?
We reviewed 1,600 of these files over the last year, and what we found was that there were hundreds of cases in which the Boy Scouts of America were the first to learn about allegations of sexual abuse, and there's no indication that those reports were shared with law enforcement. In 100 cases, we found overt evidence that the Boy Scouts had tried to cover up abuse, including some cases hiding abuse from the parents of the victims. This report that was released just on Tuesday contains some similar evidence, actually. It's not highlighted in the summary, but if you look into the details inside the report, you'll see that many cases reviewed by the Boy Scouts' own expert were not ever shared with authorities. There was no involvement of law enforcement in a high percentage of these cases. And in many cases, parents, in 7 cases, I believe, the Boy Scouts' own expert found that parents of victims had not been notified. So clearly there's more to this report than just the summary, what the summary suggests.
Jason, do you think the response from the Boy Scouts, they are investigating now years of these files, do you think the response has been appropriate?
I know a lot of people who've been in touch with us and who we've reached out to feel like this is an important step. The Boy Scouts in its 100-year history has never looked into these files to determine whether anything in these files could help them protect youth better. So it's overdue, I think. Whether it's enough is yet to be seen. I think what's going to happen in the coming weeks is hundreds of these files are going to become public, and people all across the country are going to be able to see for themselves, not what the Boy Scout says about these files, not what we've reported about these files. They're going to be able to look for themselves. I think that's going to create a new wave of interest.
All right, Jason Felch from the Los Angeles Times, who first brought this story to us. Thank you so much. And also Tom Scales, Executive Director of Voice Today. Thank you.
Coming up on Starting Point, she is one of the